must really be high up. The air feels so different.
Dad?
Yes?
I'm hungry.
Well, you should have eaten your breakfast.
We'll get you something as soon as we get to the hotel, okay?
Okay, Mom.
Hey, wasn't it around here that the Donner Party got snowbound?
I think that was farther west in the Sierras.
What was the Donner Party?
They were a party of settlers in covered wagon times. They got snowbound one winter in the mountains. They had to resort to cannibalism in order to stay alive.
You mean they ate each other up?
They had to, in order to survive.
Jack.
Don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
"70 years after the murder of 6 million Jews, Iran's rulers promised to destroy my country, murder my people, and the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here, has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence. Deafening silence.
First time in my life, my eyes are wide open. Oh, my lover, for the first time in my life, my eyes can see. I see the wind, oh, I see the trees. Everything is clear in my heart. I see the clouds, oh, I see the sky. Everything is clear in our world. Oh, my love, for the first time in my life, my mind is wide open. Oh, my lover, for the first time in my life, my mind can feel. I feel sorrow, oh, I feel dreams. Everything is clear in my heart. I feel life, oh, I feel love. Everything is clear in our world.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, the neoconservatives were the driving force for the American war in Iraq. And also, I guess you'd say, the driving force for the overall war agenda in the Middle East, which would also include Syria and Iran, although we haven't quite fully implemented the neoconservative agenda there yet. The neoconservative position has been closely tied with that of the Israeli right, that is, the Israeli Likudniks. And the fundamental goal of their strategy has been to weaken and destabilize Israel's enemies. And the goal is not simply to really only weaken Israel's external enemies, but by so weakening Israel's external enemies, to also weaken Israel's internal enemy, the Palestinians. And perhaps many on the Israeli right perceive the Palestinians to be Israel's greatest danger, the threat to the Jewish state itself, not a threat in terms of weapons or anything, but a demographic threat. If these other Arab and Islamic states are weakened, they would not be able to provide any material or moral support to the Palestinians. If the Palestinians were weakened, they would be unable to resist and would ultimately accede to any type of solution that the Israeli government offered them. So essentially, both the neocons and the Likudniks were thinking in terms of a comprehensive solution for all of Israel's security needs, dealing with both Israel's external enemies and their internal enemy, the Palestinians. And I might say that these ideas originated in Israel. For example, in 1982, Oded Yinon put forth such ideas that Israel should use its military power to destabilize and fragment Israel's enemies. This was put forth, as I said, in 1982 during the Begin administration, when, of course, Begin did invade Lebanon, and perhaps that was, though it failed, some historians have contended there was a broader plan intended there to affect more of the Middle East to advance Israeli security. I might say that the late Israel Shahak translated Yinon's study and into English, and the name of the translation was The Zionist Plan for the Middle East. Well, the neoconservatives essentially picked up on this type of idea, and they actually proposed such a measure to the incoming Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, in 1996. This was the clean break study. This also called for Israel to use military means to weaken its enemies. And some of the authors of this study were Richard Pearl, David Wormser, and Douglas Feith. And of course, these people who were in 1996 advising the Israeli Prime Minister would be part of the Bush II administration and play significant roles in bringing about the war on Iraq. Just want to point out that in both Yinon and study and a clean break, there was an emphasis on attacking Iraq first, that Iraq was a key, let's say, a geostrategic location for Israel to destabilize all of its enemies in the Middle East. Now, after 1996, the neoconservatives started to emphasize that the threat wasn't simply to Israel, but it was a threat to the United States, that there was a terrorist threat from the Islamic and Arab countries and groups in the Middle East, that the United States had to do something about it. The fundamental threat, they emphasized, came from Saddam Hussein in Iraq. So the different the different neocon think tanks and media outlets were promoting this idea. However, the neocons wouldn't really be able to have the U.S. government implement this plan until they would become part of the executive branch. And of course, this took place in 2001 with the incoming George W. Bush administration, and Vice President Dick Cheney played a major role in bringing the neocons into the administration. Now, many people have described Cheney as a oil man, and to some extent he has been, but Cheney was very closely connected to the neocons. He was a member of the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. He was a charter member of the Project for the New American Century, PNAC. His wife, Lynn Cheney, has worked for the American Enterprise Institute. So Cheney did have this connection to the neocons, brought him aboard. However, initially, at the beginning of the Bush administration, the neocons were still, they didn't hold the top rung. They couldn't get what they wanted. They couldn't get a war in Iraq, which they were pushing. They couldn't get that pushed through right away because they were checked by Secretary of State Colin Powell and the State Department bureaucracy. Many other career bureaucrats and military brass were cool about such a military attack. So it wasn't until 9/11 that sort of pushed up the neocon position, enabled them to gain dominance in the Bush administration. The 9/11 sort of frightened the American people. It also made them angry. They wanted to strike out at their enemies, although they weren't quite sure who the enemy was. Many American people confused Osama bin Laden with Saddam Hussein. But the administration itself, others beside the neocons, were looking for some plan to enact. The neocons had one to attack Iraq, and of course the neocons, were able to persuade, to convert President George W. Bush to their position. Bush isn't really that knowledgeable on foreign policy. He looks for more simple solutions. The neocons have that solution of good, America good for the evil Islamic terrorists. So Bush was a convert, and as a result of propaganda, which you know all about, the weapons of mass destruction, in part pushed by the Office of Special Plans there, Doug Feist, neocon Doug Feist's shop, the neocons in the government and also outside were able to frighten the American people to believe that America would actually be attacked by Saddam, and then, of course, that led to America ultimately attacking Iraq.
Of the three of them, Iran is the one that is the least threat to world peace. Now, Israel, on the other hand, has never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and does not allow IAEA inspections. Yet they do have nuclear weapons, as first revealed by Mordecai Vanunu in 1985, and most recently by Germany, which admitted they have known all along Israel was arming the German-supplied Dolphin submarines with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Now, Israel likes to pretend they do not have nuclear weapons.
Mr. President, do you know of any country in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons?
With respect to nuclear weapons, I don't want to speculate. What I know is this, that if we see a nuclear arms race in a region as volatile as the Middle East, everybody will be in danger. And one of my goals is to prevent nuclear proliferation generally. I think that it's important for the United States, in concert with Russia, to lead the way on this. Okay? All right. Sam Stein, Huffington Post. Where's Sam?
And the U.S. government goes along with this gross deception because it is illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and under the Glenn Act for the U.S. government to send your money to any nation in possession of nuclear weapons technology that will not sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and refuses IAEA inspections, which is Israel. But there's no question, Israel is a nuclear power, and worse, as documents uncovered from the former government of South Africa officially confirm, Israel has been engaged in clandestine sales of nuclear weapons, which is the very activity the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is designed to prevent. It's not about a nuclear threat of war. It's not about conflict. It's not about wiping somebody off the map. It's about dollar signs. Israel's the 6th largest nuclear power on Earth. They have bombs. They have delivery systems. They have submarines loaded with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles. Nobody's going to attack them. Iran is not a threat. They're not in the habit of invading other people. We need to go back and remember the lie of the century. This whole thing about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. He's got nukes, he's got germs, he's got chemicals. Just constant pounding, selling us that war. Look at how many media outlets, how many governments, how many so-called academics, how many officials, people with gold things hanging on the walls and medals around their neck to trick you into thinking that they're truthful and honest and not to be listened to. And they all took part in the lie that Saddam Hussein had illegal weapons of mass destruction.
Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction.
Iraqi regime biological chemical attack, 45 minutes. Nuclear bomb.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Saddam, nuclear weapons.
And it's all the same people lying to you to get what they want, which is your money and your children's lives and your obedience. And the claims about Iran are just more of the same thing. It is U.S. DA choice.
Bullshit. The media are almost literally exploding with bullshit.
And the government of the United States of America and the government of Israel are absolutely convinced that you are stupid enough to fall for the same lie twice in a row. They actually think that about you. Weapons of mass destruction worked with Iraq. It'll work again. We don't have to bother ourselves. Those voters, they're stupid. They'll fall for it twice in a row.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
The U.S. government, the government of Israel, the corporate media, all in tandem, in unison, in coordinated effort, lied you into a war of conquest. Which means now there's no reason not to assume they're not doing it again. And from where I sit, when a government lies to people to lead them into a war of conquest, that is the greatest crime a government can commit against its own people. Because every other crime is wrapped up inside there. There's the lies, there's the theft and looting of the foreign invaded nation. There is the murder of soldiers on both sides of the line. Victor and vanquished suffer in wars. And when that war is unnecessary, when it is merely motivated by greed and the lust for power, that is a crime not just against the invaded nation, it is a crime against the people of the invading nation. The corporate TV news are lying about everything except the sports scores and the weather, and they're not even all that good on the weather. That's why we call them prostitutes.
Iraqi nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Mushroom cloud.
The mushroom cloud. Iraq mobile biological weapons labs. Saddam Hussein 500 tons of sarin, mustard, and VX nerve agent. Saddam Hussein chemical agents. Saddam Hussein 38,000 liters botulinum toxin, aluminum tubes, nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Saddam Hussein uranium from Africa.
Iran, nuclear weapon. Iranian regime, Iranian government, nuclear weapons. Iran's leaders, Iran, nuclear weapon. Iran, Iranian program, Iran, nuclear weapon.
It was the next day, brothers, and I had truly done my best morning and afternoon to play it their way and sit like a horror show cooperative malchick in the chair of torture while they flashed nasty bits of ultra-violence on the screen. Though not on the soundtrack, my brothers, the only sound being music. Then I noticed, in all my pain and sickness, what music it was that, like, cracked and boomed. It was Ludwig van. Ninth Symphony, Fourth Movement.
Sin? What's all this about sin?
That! Using Ludwig van like that, he did no harm to anyone! Beethoven just wrote music!
Are you referring to the background score?
Yes!
You've heard Beethoven before?
Yes!
So you're keen on music?
Yes!
Can't be helped. Here's the punishment element, perhaps. Governor ought to be pleased. I'm sorry, Alex. This is for your own good. You'll have to bear with us for a while.
But it's not fair! It's not fair I should feel ill when I hear lovely, lovely Ludwig van.
You must take your chance, boy. The choice has been all yours.
You needn't take it any further, sir. You've proved to me that all this ultra-violence and killing is wrong, wrong and terribly wrong. I've learned my lesson, sir. I see now what I've never seen before. I'm cured, praise God.
You're not cured yet, boy.
But sirs, missus, I see that it's wrong. It's wrong because it's like against society. It's wrong because everybody has the right to live and be happy without being told, chopped and knifed.
No, boy, you really must leave it to us. And be cheerful about it. In less than a fortnight now, you will be a free man.
There is this inextricable tie between culture, religion, ethnicity, that most people don't fully understand. That is unique and, how can I say it, so strong with Jews worldwide. There is a, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
People can't figure out how things have happened. So the point is, we're trying to prevent, like you were emphasizing in the last hour, another bloodbath. And believe me, if, as you know, and I'm not telling you or your listeners probably anything, if something breaks out in the Middle East, these top wire pullers couldn't care less if 1/3 of the people of Israel get killed, or if 1/3 of the people of Iran get killed. And if we, you know, if we talk about the World War II thing here, that is what happened in World War II.
How many Jews, Jim, were sacrificed by Zionists in World War II?
Well, I mean,
we don't know the exact number, but it was a hell of a lot more than needed, and they did it politically.
Christopher John Bjorkness, who I did the interview with, he called me and we did an interview on this thing. He estimated at 1.2 million. I mean, I know many people estimated at 6 million. I do think that number is problematical. But I always say to people, and then even the neo-Nazis of today will say 300 to 500,000. I always say to people, hey, one unjust murder is an infinite outrage in the eyes of God, because every human being, in my opinion, has a soul, and it's an infinite outrage. So the point is that though if I had to explain to somebody in one or two sentences what what happened, what Hitler was all about, is he was funded to the top by the Rothschild-Warburg bankers for primarily to round up the everyday Jews in the Germany and the Germanic territories, and to put some of them in concentration camps, and to send the rest of them down to Palestine, or as many as he could down to Palestine, as a beginning of the takeover of Palestine by Israel, which then sets up the dynamics we're facing now of a potential World War III.
Right, exactly. The first destination, of course, was Madagascar, but when the Germans lost control of the oceans, that was out the window very quickly. The strategic plan, if you've just elucidated it perfectly, was to, of course, inject a large number of Jews into Palestine to set up the situation which we've been watching for the last 60-plus years now. However, if we go and look at World War II history and simply read Rabbi Michael Dov Wiesmandel's 10 Questions to the Zionists, you folks will get a heck of a good idea of exactly how the Jews, the common rank and file Jews, were used by international Zionists and money changers to create the terrible situation we call World War II, and the outcome we know.
State of affairs. But anyway, one of the myths I think that is most problematic about this issue, about the issue of Israel and Palestine, is that there's a sense that's been going on for so long that there's not going to be any hope. There can't be any hope because these people over there have been killing each other for so long. And I would argue that this is not true, first of all. But besides that there is an actual point in time when we can start discussing this issue. And that point in time is precisely the 29th of November, 1947, which is when the United Nations came up with this ridiculous map. And this is called the Partition Resolution. And it was a resolution to partition Palestine into two countries and to give the larger portion to a small group of immigrants and the smaller portion to the far larger community of the native inhabitants of the land. So there are close to 500,000 or so Jews that were living there at the time, and probably about close to 1.5 million Palestinians. Yet the United Nations decided that the majority, the larger portion of the country, would be given to the smaller Jewish community, who, like I said, were mostly immigrants. And you have to wonder, because people always blame the Palestinians for not accepting this. You hear this over and over again. If the Palestinians had accepted the 1947 partition, then everything would have been fine. And you have to wonder who thought in their right mind, and why would any Palestinian accept that their homeland, their country, would be divided by an outside power, and the larger portion would be given to a group of colonizers and immigrants, only because they claim that thousands and thousands of years ago their ancestors inhabited that land. Why would anybody accept something like this? And how did anybody anticipate? And I don't believe that anybody accepted this would last. And of course, it didn't last a single day, because as soon as this resolution was accepted by the United Nations, the Israeli forces began a massive campaign of ethnic cleansing. Now, the story that we hear is that the Arabs attacked the Jewish community, intending to destroy the Jewish community. A small fledgling state that was finally recognized by the United Nations. But as we look at the two communities, we see two communities that were states in the making. They were hoping to be states and had institutions of state. But the Jewish community had developed a strong militia that by that time numbered close to 40,000 armed men. My father was an officer in that militia. There was no equivalent on the Palestinian side. There was no regular militia on the Palestinian side. So who are these Arabs that supposedly attacked? The other Arab countries, mostly Egypt, joined in trying to defend Palestine much later on, around May of 1948, so 6 or 7 months later. And they weren't successful. They were defeated by the Israelis quite easily. So this myth was created in order to hide the fact that as soon as this resolution was accepted, not only did Israel not accept it, but it went on a massive campaign of ethnic cleansing that goes on to this day.
I was 9 when Hitler came to power. I was about 10 months in Auschwitz. And I learned a lot about the doctrines of a fascist state. The lesson I took from my stay in Auschwitz was anybody belonging to the Jewish people is not allowed to behave ever like our perpetrator, the people who did the thing to us. Look, I think why I have a certain right to be proud of being of Jewish origin is because the Jews were the pioneers of interhuman ethics. And the Jewish idea of how to treat a foreigner, how to treat a servant, which is in the Old Testament, was taken up by nobody less than Jesus Christ, who was the last of the great Jewish prophets. The prophets in the whole tradition wanted to stress and to stress the ethical content of Judaism, and so there is reason enough to be proud. And what is happening now in Israel towards the Palestinians is exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. They treat them like vermin. They talk about them in terms, I mean, like for instance, the chief of staff of the Israeli army recently, the Palestinians are a cancerous growth. I mean, that type of talking is exactly the opposite, and it's actually like Nazi talking. That's what was said about me when I was a Jewish boy in Germany under the Nazis. You know, when the Nazis gassed the Jews, the world was silent. Now the world is silent while the Jews or the Israelis harass, humiliate, and steal away land from the Palestinians. And the world is silent. And I want to awake the world, because any criticism on the policies of Israel is hampered and made impossible by a terrible trick and crime of Israeli propaganda, that any criticism on the politics of Israel comes out is induced by anti-Semitic feelings. And our main purpose is to show to the world that we are Jews and we are conscious Jews, and we want to show that you must criticize Israel if you at all want anything good for the Jews in the world, because what Israel is doing is destroying the Jewish world and the Jewish heritage.
And they don't see how absurd of a statement that is. And the reality is, the truth of the matter is, that Palestinian communities within Israel are so neglected, many of them are so neglected, that they are the conditions there are far worse than they are in Gaza, in some cases. You'd be hard-pressed to find a single dollar invested or a single permit given to Palestinians inside Israel to build anything at all in 65 years. And of course there's population growth and so on. All the while, where Israeli cities and towns all around them are being built and built and built, and developed and expanded. And the same, of course, happens in the West Bank. Now, in the West Bank, the Palestinians have no rights at all. They're not counted at all. They're at the mercy of the Israeli army, which, like I said earlier, is no more than a terrorist organization. So they can be killed, as we see now in Gaza, every single day, in broad daylight. They can be detained and arrested for as long as the local commander decides to keep them in jail without trial. Their homes can be destroyed, they can be taken across the border. Anything that the army or the security forces want to do to them is fair game. This is the reality today, and this is the only way in which you can have a Jewish state. So anybody who supports the notion of a Jewish state has to understand it's a package deal, because a Jewish state comes with racism in a country where half the population is not Jewish. And we've been talking about this, and I've been talking about this to people, over the last few weeks, where people talk about what Israel does, people talk about the occupation, people talk about the injustice, and they always fall short of stating the obvious, the big elephant in the room. That is the cost of having a Jewish state. Maybe Jews do deserve a state. I don't know. I don't think they do. I don't think it matters. But the point is that if you're going to have a Jewish state where half the population are not Jewish, we have to accept that it comes with racist laws, it comes with killing civilians, and it comes with holding thousands of political prisoners. That's the only way it can be done. It's like having a white state in a black country in Africa. This is how it's done. And this has to be the realization. And Israel has a very, very powerful PR system that is able to present it as a democracy. But that's because they only look at the population that I represent. But I am hopeful. I am hopeful because as we look at history, we see that regimes like this always fall. The Berlin Wall fell. 6 months before it fell, if you had anybody suggested it would fall, people would think you're crazy. Apartheid fell. A year before apartheid fell, if anybody suggested that Nelson Mandela would be president one day, people would think you're crazy. Mubarak fell, and if anybody 6 months earlier would have suggested that Mubarak could be removed with a popular revolution, they would be taken to an asylum, right away. These things happen. They have a tendency to fall. They're unsustainable. Not only are they morally wrong, but they're also unsustainable. 6.5 million people cannot hold 5.5 million people down forever. And Palestinian resistance is very strong. Far stronger than any weapons Israel can come up with. And as we see these types of regimes being toppled, we see, number one, that no violence has to take place. They can be done in a non-violent way. There is no need for any bloodshed. It's a possibility, but there's no need for any bloodshed. And with Israeli societies being similar as they are, and they're very similar societies, very high education levels, over 92%, 93% literacy on both sides. They're on both sides. The Palestinians are in Gaza. You have doctors, you have engineers, you have teachers, you have social workers waiting to go to work. Most Israelis are descendants of people who came from Arab countries. So if they don't speak Arabic, their parents do, and their grandparents certainly do. Because most Israelis are descendants of Arab Jews who immigrated from Iraq, from North Africa, from Yemen, from Syria, from Lebanon. So most Israelis are actually Arabs. In both societies, most people are kind of somewhere in the middle. They're not, there's like a rich upper crust that everybody hates and wants to get rid of. There's a small fringe of radical fanatics that everybody wants to see their power diminish. And you've got people in the middle who would be ready to go to work and move on as quickly as they could, as long as they saw hope. As long as they saw people talking about this. But all of this can only happen once we start saying the obvious, stating the obvious. Equal rights is more important and more valuable than a Jewish state. Respecting people's human rights and civil rights is more important than having a Jewish state. Now, some people may disagree. Many people disagree, in fact. They think having a Jewish state is more important than all of this. But they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. They're no different than thinking that you should have a white state or a Christian state or a Muslim state. A state needs to belong to its citizens. And most countries in the world, the reality is, are multinational states. You don't have to go far. Look at Switzerland. Look at Belgium. People have found a way in which the state can function and the society can function when you have multi-nations within it. Multi-languages, multi-cultures. As long as everybody's rights are respected, everybody is safe. You don't need a Jewish state for Jews to be safe. You need a state where everybody is safe for Jews to be safe, which is, of course, the argument. So the reason I'm hopeful, and the reason I would encourage you to be hopeful, is number one, because without hope, we're not going to do anything. And somebody asked me last night, a lady asked me last night, she said, well, I'm 70 years old. Do you think I should be hopeful? Because I only have, a certain number of years to live. And the thing is with hope is we're not hopeful because we know it's going to happen tomorrow. We're hopeful because we know it's possible and we do everything we can to make it happen. So if we believe in peace and justice, if we believe that people are equal and deserve equal rights, if we believe in human rights, that a state needs to respect the human rights and the civil rights of its citizens, then there's hope. Then we need to talk about it. And the biggest fear that non-Jews have is to talk against the Jewish state, to say that a Jewish state is wrong. Because of course the pushback is, well, you're anti-Semites, you're Ahmadinejad, you're Nazis. But what does it make you if you support a state that drops one-ton bombs on children? What does it make you when you support a state that has thousands of political prisoners? What does it make you if you support, whether you're Jewish or not, a state that gives more water to children when they're Jewish than if they're Palestinians? What does that make you? And that's, I think, the key question. So maybe we're all anti-Semites, maybe we're all, I don't know, Jew haters, I don't know. But the point is that if anybody supports this other option, then they're supporting, it's a package deal, like I said earlier. So I'll say this and I'll end with this. I think there's no reason for Israelis and Palestinians, and particularly Israeli and Palestinian children, to live under these conditions. It's a beautiful country, as many of you who have been there have seen. It's rich with culture. It's rich with possibilities. It's rich with two nations that have the ability to do great things. And it will happen as soon as they're given the opportunity to live together with equal rights and with respect for the human rights and their civil rights. Okay, thank you very much.